Art for Artists was invited to be part of the Kennedy Heights Cultural Arts Center's show Collective Impact, which is an all-woman art show from groups of women artists in the Cincinnati area. We were invited to participate and create a collaborative piece. Art for Artists has had a long history of creating collaborative pieces. It's tricky when you have a group of artists each wanting to express their individual creativity and at the same time trying to put that together as an assemblage or one large sculpture. I selected the walk as a theme using black shoes, women's shoes, to unify our piece. We selected women who were inspirational to us, who came before us along the path that we were walking. Thus the title of the piece, The Walk.
When I began Art for Artists in 2006, I had no idea how the number of years we'd stay together and the number of ways we'd explore. It's been a pure joy of growth for all of us. The art we create would perhaps never have happened if we were working as solos, but as groups, the statements they've made are so profound and so lovely that it's been just a pure joy. I'd do it all again. We're still meeting after all these years.
The Shoes art project by A4A was a perfect vehicle. I can imagine in holding a muddy boot, for example, of Harriet Tubman's perilous treks down south to rescue slaves and bringing them north to freedom. The Shoes project was a great adventure for participants as well, giving an artistic purpose and shared joy in art making in the darkest days of COVID isolation. I learned so much about women. I used to think Cleopatra was just an Elizabeth Taylor-style vamp, and found out that she was a strong leader of her people and a key player in world politics of her time. Some of her heroines are closer to home, mothers, grandmothers, and foremothers whose heroism was based in daily life, in raising sturdy generations, tasks that sustain life and human history. When I actually saw the show set up at the Kennedy Arts Center, I nearly cried. It was so stunning, so meaningful, saying so much with pairs of women's shoes.
Beulah Rolene. When you stop by to visit Grandma Rolene, there is always something freshly baked or a jello salad waiting. You will stay for lunch. She stands tall and stalwart, as she always did. Smiling for the photographer was never her German style, but her love and devotion to her family was never doubted. When you were with Grandma Rolene, you were home. With a needle and thread, she always quilted and embroidered for all the girls' pillowcases and tea towels. My Grandma Rolene was never a teacher, but always a fine example.
My name is Nancy Dreisbach. I joined Art for Artists a number of years ago. I had moved back to Ohio from Santa Fe, where I'd lived for 23 years, and didn't know a soul. I was suggested that I look up Art for Artists, and Arnell Dow, who was the leader of it, had taught my children art in grade school. So I knew Arnell, and I decided to go and visit. And I found a group of women who were supportive, sharing, generous, and good artists. And I have learned that this is a group of kindred souls that support each other in a way that's unbelievable almost, and that shares their knowledge and their material stuff and their joy for living and their love of art. And I couldn't find a better group. I sort of credit them with saving my life.
As a member of Art for Artists, one of the things that I've grown to really appreciate is the idea of collaboration with fellow artists, the fellowship of a shared language about art, and the shared experience of putting together a larger work that I'm a part of in community with my fellow artists.
When you walk through art museums or you're looking through art history books, very rarely do you see any mention of women artists. That's why I've chosen Louise Nevelson. She was born in 1905, didn't start art seriously until she was in her 30s. She used unconventional art materials and established her reputation as a sculptural artist at a time of abstract expressionism. She proved that women have a place in the art world. Her works paved the way for the beginning of the 1970s feminist art movement, initiating discussion of the women's role in the art world.
Rachel Carson, poet-biologist, stood tall and strong. Her challenge to those who would try and control nature through chemicals may be her greatest accomplishment. Her influence to ban chemicals such as DDT led to the first national environmental policy in America in 1969. This led to the Clean Air and Wilderness Act. Her early book on art ecology, Silent Spring, may have been her greatest accomplishment, informing the American people, which led to the first Earth Day.
The second pair of shoes I did is called Shooting Star. This pair of shoes is dedicated to Cincinnati civil rights activist and educator Marion Spencer. A 1952 incident at segregated Coney Island Amusement Park became the catalyst that shot Marion Spencer into the foreground of Cincinnati politics. This pair of platform heels reminded me of a roller coaster and seemed perfect to depict my tribute to Marion Spencer and her uphill battle for justice and the wild ride towards reworking Cincinnati's education system. I felt strongly about Marion Spencer because my older daughters were among the first to take part in the alternate education system that she devised for Cincinnati schools.
When we were told to choose someone who was an influence in our lives, I wasn't sure who to pick. And then I realized that there were a whole group of people. So I chose to do a tribute to all the sisters who had taught me in my way through school, which was from first grade through graduate school. I decided to choose them as a group because they influenced me as a group. The way they taught so much more than just the subject, and the kindness that they instilled in the students. So I chose to inscribe their names on the shoes and to tie the shoes and them together with a rosary.
Profound lessons learned came from unexpected places in 2018. A 50-foot by 80-foot artworks mural in Over the Rhine proved physically daunting but exhilarating work alongside very talented artists and high school students. And then there was Gwen, who lived across the parking lot. She often stopped to offer a cheerful word, always keeping an eye on Eddie, who spent his day watching us and talking to mainly himself. She brought him groceries and shepherded him into their complex, where his words became too jumbled and a bit too loud. Gwen always projected a quiet dignity and assuredness that challenged this privileged white woman's perception of the lives lived by those in poverty. I found a life well lived is accumulated in many small and varied ways. I created a proposed mural for Gwen's apartment to honor this everyday heroine. 2 gifts from Gwen, the whimsical angel and elegant high heels, capture her beautiful spirit that I came to admire deeply.
When I heard that Art for Artists was going to have an exhibit based on women we personally admired, I immediately thought of RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her efforts to take many gender equality and pay discrimination issues to the court and work toward making them into law is inspiring. Her persistent push and grace under pressure make me proud. The other pair of shoes I contributed to the walk include the entertainer Dinah Washington, who is an American jazz and R&B singer and pianist. She had many hits throughout the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. She was supposed to be a gospel singer, but that wasn't her way. And Maria Griever, the first recognized successful female Mexican composer. Though they lived in different centuries, both broke out of traditional norms where women were expected to follow other singers to express their musical artistry. Miss Griever was a classically trained musician who wrote over 1,000 songs, including pop songs, and performed in Latin America and Europe and the U.S. One of her hits was "What a Difference a Day Makes." When Dinah Washington performed that song, which had been written nearly 50 years earlier, she won a Grammy for the Best R&B Performance of 1975. She has since been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For your pleasure, we included the QR code soundtrack for What a Difference a Day Makes, in English and in Spanish. These women represent the accomplishments of the many women performers we've enjoyed during our lifetime.
My shoes were chosen to admire 2 women taught me something about living and something about loving. The first is my sister. My sister Barbara was also an artist. She is my baby sister. She's a couple years younger than me. She was the most loving person in my memory. She was loving of everybody in the neighborhood. She went around and visited old people. She was just a very loving person. My sister was a true love kind of person. She painted pansies on my mother's sneakers. White sneakers, purple pansies, purple and lavender. They were so beautiful that's why I brought them to my art piece. My other art piece was Maleficent. Maleficent is an imaginary character from a Disney movie. I admired her so much. She had these powerful wings. She thought she had found her true love, and her true love was the king's son, and he cut off her wings. The most horrible thing you can do to somebody is take away their power, and that's what he did to Maleficent. She was furious. She lived in agony. So she found that the king had a baby girl, and she put a curse on the baby girl. The baby girl would turn 16 and prick her finger on a spinning wheel and would fall into a trance. And the only thing that could wake her was true love's kiss. The princess grew up in the woods. She met a prince. Maleficent figured that this was the true love for the little girl. So she encouraged the prince to go to the palace and kiss the little girl, who was now 16. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She didn't wake up. And Maleficent was just shattered because she wanted to wake the girl up. She'd become fond of her. In the end, Maleficent Knowing that the girl would never wake up, she kissed her, and she woke up. Maleficent's kiss to the girl was true love's kiss. My sister is the one who showed me true love. So I put Maleficent with her powerful love, with my sister and her powerful love, and the shoes came together for me.
I chose 4 women. I knew that if I made these shoes, they would come back home to me. And I didn't want 4 shoes in my home, so I talked to my granddaughter, who's a new teacher. Together, we picked out the women so that she would have these as teaching aids in her classroom. I want to start by telling you a little bit about Cleopatra. I got her because somebody gave me these funky shoes. What I knew about Cleopatra going in was what we learned in the movies about Cleopatra. She was so much more than that. She was a strong woman who saw an end of a dynasty coming and wanted to set her country up to prosper. She knew about medicines and wrote many, many articles and books. She spoke, I think, 7 or 8 languages because she needed to be able to converse with all of the countries around and was not going to trust an interpreter. She and Mark Antony decided to go into war together. She made this strategy with him and went into battle with him. So she was not just hiding someplace, but she was also a very kind leader, because when Egypt would have its periodic drought, she would open the royal granaries to make sure that her people were fed. She's one of the first women to appear on foreign coins. She was just an outstanding woman for her time. Ida B. Wells was an interesting woman. She was born into poverty. Her parents died when she was very young. She was the oldest of her siblings. She raising these children when she was not quite out of childhood herself. She was a product after the slavery, but knew the institution rather well. And so she became a journalist. She told the story of white privilege. And the way that this came out was her friend, who was also a black man, at a grocery store, and his grocery store sold to the black community, whereas the white man wanted to sell to everybody and, of course, charge extra for the black community. There was an altercation, and the white store owner and his friends set the grocery store of the black person on fire and burned it down. Her friend died in that fire. And this was the thing that really sparked her and made her writings rise. I'd like to talk about Nannie Helen Burroughs at this point. She was a black woman growing up between the end of slavery and emancipation age, and she was able to see that black women were the ones that were really pretty much suffering. They were no longer slaves, but they were unable to earn a wage, and so she just took it on herself to begin a school for women and girls, young girls, to do work that could be paid. She only took monies to fund this school from the black community, and most of the other schools had taken monies from captains of industry. So the people who went to the school learned a trade, but they also were schooled in religious beliefs. It was also a professional, dignified demeanor that she instilled in her students. Shirley Chisholm is the next woman that I would like to talk about a little bit. And we probably know her because she lived in our lifetime, so we have some recollection of what she has accomplished in her life. She started out as a teacher and ended up running for President of the United States. She was originally elected to Congress and worked primarily in the area of childhood education, and like food stamps were a part of her legacy. Right. So being a black woman, she was one of the first black women in Congress. So being a black woman, she had hurdles to overcome. Later on, when she was, kind of at the end of her her run in the Senate and even the run for the President of the United States. And she said, I encountered much more prejudice as a woman than I did as a black person.
This group has been so welcoming and so eager to share their knowledge. And so here they are opening up to this newcomer. It's wonderful, and everybody's so unique, and they bring some wonderful gift, and they're all there to share. I'm very grateful to this group.